Google stock keeps getting hammered. This stock down another 4.5% here today. It's been getting hit very heavily recently while its friends are having a whole lot of fun. Check this out. This is a 1-month chart here. Google stock's down about 10% in the past month, while Amazon's up about 10%, Meta's up 21%, and Nvidia's up 28%. So here we are in a situation where Google stock just keeps falling. Its friends are all having a party and having so much fun. And so in this video here today, we're going to go in depth on Google. We're going to talk about if this is an easy, safe 2x opportunity to 2x your money or more over the next few years, which whenever you think about 2xing your money in a matter of a few years, let's call it 3 to 5 years, usually think about something riskier, right? We're going to speak about, is this more of a safe way to 2x your money? So very in-depth video all on Google McDougal here today. Spent the last quite a bit of time preparing this video for you guys here today. I hope you really enjoy it. And by the way, I just got to say this because it was a big day. Elf on a Shelf did hit 200 here today. Didn't quite close at 200. Maybe that's tomorrow, but it was a big day. So congrats to all Elf shareholders out there. Big day for us, okay? Appreciate y'all being here as always. All I ask in return, smash a like for this video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That's all I ask in return. I also created you guys an entire free brand new workshop. I get asked a lot how much money you need to retire, how much money you need to quit your job, things like that. I answer all that in depth in a video. It's a free workshop. It's pinned comment down there. I think you'll enjoy and learn a lot from that one. All right, guys, let's get into Google McDougal here today, okay? Where I actually want to start with Google McDougal is at one of the highlights. As this video goes along, we're going to get, I would say, lower and lower and probably darker and darker. But we're going to start out with bright skies here in regards to Google McDougal right off the bat. Okay, so Google is sitting on $110 billion in cash equivalents, and marketable securities. Absolutely unbelievable number, right? Total assets on this company has now ballooned to over $400 billion. Meanwhile, long-term debt's only $13 billion. I mean, we're talking about, they have about 9x the amount of cash equivalents, and marketable securities than they do long-term debt. That's insane. I mean, that's absolutely insane, right? Total liabilities of the company is $119 billion. So they almost have more in just cash equivalents, and marketable securities than they do in total liabilities. That's insane, right? So you're looking at a total stockholder equity here of about $283 billion. So that's one of the best balance sheets you're ever going to find from any company in the world. That's what you call a fortress balance sheet here. Now, here's where things start to get good and then bad. Check this out. So, this is the latest quarterly numbers from Google. As far as their revenues, they were up about 9% year over year. If you look at a constant currency basis, they were up 10% year over year. Operating margin was up 1 percentage point year over year for the company. That's good. Operating income went all the way up to over $84 billion from $74 billion in the same quarter last year. That's good. Net income's up to almost $74 billion in net income they did for this latest quarter. $5.80 EPS versus $4.56 in the same quarter last year. So it's all really good. Nice revenue growth. We can call it 9 to 10% range. Nice operating income growth of even better, right? And net income growth of even better. And EPS growth of even better, right? It's good. But the problem with this is Google always gets grouped in with Meta. They're joined at the hip, essentially, in regards to their numbers. Now, sometimes one company is going to outperform the other a little bit in terms of revenue growth and EPS growth, but it's not expected to be a wide gap between these companies. They're expected to be somewhat close. If there is a wide gap that opens, that means there's likely something wrong with one of the business models, or the other company is just executing on an extremely high level. In regards to Meta, this company just reported top-line growth, revenue growth, of nearly 25 percentage points. Oh boy, massive divergence. We're talking about over a double up in terms of revenue percent growth. That's a problem for Google. That should not be that dramatic. On top of that, Meta just grew their bottom line by about 200% year over year, and they had stronger guide. That is all problematic in a major way for Google. That means either Meta's just gotten so much stronger as a company overall on top and bottom line that they're way out competing Google, or that means Google has something going wrong with their business model to be putting up this bad of numbers versus Meta. If Meta was at 12, 13, 14%, revenue growth, people would be like, okay, yeah, Meta's growing a little faster, but it's not that big of a deal. 25% versus 9 to 10% is a problem, a big problem. Now, where this leads into even a bigger problem for Google is, remember, everybody's got a finite amount of money to put in the market, right? If you're a hedge fund manager, you might look out there and you might say, why would I buy Google when I could get Meta, which is growing much more rapidly and also has a fortress balance sheet and a phenomenal income statement, but is growing, we can call it over 2x the growth rate as a Google for a somewhat similar valuation, right? And this is why Meta stock is outperforming Google so significantly now at this point in time, because these fund managers are like, why would I even mess with Google? Like my way better opportunity is Meta from a risk reward standpoint. That's a problem for Google. Okay. Now, if we look at the segment operating results here, we're going to find something very, very important, and this is really good news for Google. Check this out. This is their operating income based upon segments. Okay, Google services up to nearly $27 billion in operating income. That's great. That's from a little over $20 billion the same quarter last year. Google Cloud, very important. Going from an operating loss at this point last year to now starting to bring in big money, $864 million in operating income in this latest quarter. So we're talking about Google Cloud going from a drag on the business to now them starting to make hopefully big profits from that business line over the coming years, right? That's a big flip. I mean, we're talking about, run the math on that. That's $1 billion flip year over year. $1 billion. And remember, this is in a 3-month span. Run that out over a year and maybe you're at a $4 billion flip there. We can call it a $3 to $4 billion flip. That's massive for this company. Also very important is other bets category is getting in a much better place. In the same quarter last year, they lost over $1.2 billion operating loss versus $863 million operating loss. So other bets is getting better for the company overall. Now, this alphabet level activities, some of those things in there, a lot of it can be one-offs in relation to some of the layoffs he done and things like that. So it's a really huge number, but a lot of that is one-off. So just something to keep in mind there. But overall, obviously, their operating income grew substantially for the company year over year. But I'm telling you that Google Cloud part is very, very important in this story in relation to Google McDougal. Okay. Now, also some very good news here. Look at this income statement over the past 4 years, right? I want to specifically compare to where this company was prior to Rona to where this company is now, right? And if we take a look here, $161 billion in revenue they did in 2019 versus last year in 2023, they did over $307 billion in revenue. So they nearly 2x'd the company's revenues on a year, on basically, a 4-year span there. That's very impressive. On top of that, gross profit went from $89 billion in gross profit in 2019 to 2023, they did $175 billion, so nearly a 2x in their gross profit. It's very consistent. I mean, look at this company's numbers year in and year out. Extremely consistent, very predictable. Yeah, there's some times when the growth rates are much higher than other times, right? But that's Mr. Consistent. That's very good. No, what's even more impressive, look at the operating income. Check this out. They went from about $36 billion in operating income in 2019 to this past year in 2023, over $88 billion of operating income. So they way over 2x their operating income, versus from 2019 to 2023. That's great news. Then if we look at earnings from continuing operations, it went from $34 billion to $73 billion, almost $74 billion this latest year, so well over 2x there. Net income, obviously, well over 2x. And then look at the diluted EPS. Went from 246 to 580, right? Well over 2x. And once again, that's just a matter of a few years. So when we look at Google, we see a company here that is very consistent, puts a very nice growth, has a great balance sheet. Okay, that's great. But there's a reason the stock keeps falling. Let me show you the reasons. Here it is, okay? Disruption. Disruption is the scariest term you could face as a big established company. When you're being disrupted, that means somebody's coming to eat your lunch. That means they're slowly eating away at your moat around your business. Now, for the longest time, Google was the disruptor. They were the company that was coming in to eat your lunch. They were the ones that were coming in to disrupt your business model. And they did this for a lot of different business models out there over the years and just slowly ate away at them. But now at this point in time, it is starting to become very evident and clear that Google went from the disruptor to the one starting to be disrupted. And it's going across almost every single business line this company has right now, which is the extra scary thing. And let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. There's 4 big, huge core businesses for Google. They own a lot of different companies and a lot of different businesses. But at the end of the day, how are they bringing home the bacon? They're bringing home the bacon through 4 different ways, okay? And what you're going to find is this is a little scary, okay? So, first way they're bringing home the bacon is what we spoke about earlier in regards to Google Cloud. Now, in regards to Google Cloud, I do not look at Google as a disruptor. I also don't look at them as being disrupted. And so this is very good news for Google in regards to their cloud business. They're the third player there. At the end of the day, AWS and Microsoft are always going to, they're the big dogs. They're always going to be fighting out for that number 1, number 2 position. They're what you're going to always consider as a business. And Google Cloud's just kind of that third player back there somewhere, okay? Maybe you have a very specific need that, maybe you'd use Google Cloud. But most people, if they're going to use cloud, most businesses, they're going to go AWS, they're going to go Azure, okay? So I wouldn't say they're disrupted. I wouldn't say they're being disrupted in that first line. The second big business line for Google overall is Android. Now, I'm shocked. I didn't even realize the numbers were starting to get like this in regards to this. But believe it or not, based upon facts and data, Apple is eating into Android's market share. Shockingly enough. And it's just Apple's just slowly eating up the market share on a global basis year after year after year in regards to Android. And that was thought, if we go back 5-7 years ago, I'm just telling you, no one thought that was realistic. I don't know if maybe it's because there's the iPhone base is getting so much bigger now that maybe a lot of people are starting to use secondhand and third-hand iPhones now, right? Picture somebody in a developed country maybe using, an iPhone that's 4 years outdated or 6 years outdated or something like that, right? But they're still out there and they're still being used. So I don't know what's going on here, but it's clear iOS is eating their market share. Now, iOS obviously came out with massive market share right from the go, right? Being the leaders in iPhone. And then slowly as the years ticked on, Android just ate Apple alive when it came to market share on a global basis, right? Apple went from 34% market share all the way down to their lows in 2016 of 19%. Android went from 2% market share to about 70% market share in 2016. And this is why I told you at the beginning, if we go back 5-7 years ago, it was not thought that iOS could even remotely try to eat into Android's market share. But look at this now. They went from about 19% market share to now this past year, they're at about 29% market share. So this is a problem for Android. And I think the next iPhone, by the way, is going to be a super cycle for iPhone. So, I wouldn't be surprised at all if iOS goes to 30% market share. And Apple's pushing hard into India over this next 5 years. So Android, I think, is going to continue to likely get their lunch eaten here, which is pretty darn shocking. Okay? Because that, like I said, 5-7 years ago, there was no way people thought that could happen. Next up here, what about YouTube? You're watching this video on YouTube. Well, here's the deal. YouTube slowly getting eaten from attention-related things, right? Anything that takes attention away, people have a finite amount of time to spend on content in general, right? Maybe it's video content, things like that. And so, especially with a lot of the younger generation, they're kind of used to shorter format videos. Instagram Reels, these 15-second, 30-second, 1 minute long clips. TikTok, same exact thing. YouTube's much more known for 10-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute videos, even hour, 2-hour long podcasts, things like that, right? That's what YouTube's really known for. But the problem is, and that's great, they've got their market there, but the problem is the more success TikTok has and Instagram has, the more time that eats away from somebody could spend on YouTube. Because once again, let's say you have an extra 2 hours to spend on social media. So instead of somebody pulling up YouTube, they might pull up Instagram, they might pull up TikTok, right? So that's a problem that they're slowly being eaten by those. Also, on top of that, I know X, many times gets kind of laughed at, but I've got to say, I'm actually impressed with what Elon's pulling off over there at X. I'm watching it, I'm participating in the community, and I'm actually think Elon's going to pull it off, guys. I really think Elon's going to pull it off. And Elon's pushing heavy into video-related content as well. And so it's fascinating because we posted this video an hour ago. I released this on my reaction channel and also released it on X. And it says 6,600 views on that. Since it was released an hour ago. I can tell you a lot of those views are not really true views like a YouTube view is. This could just be somebody scrolling for a second and then like scrolls up again or something like that. It's versus YouTube, it's like somebody's dedicating, I'm going to watch this video, right? So there's a big difference there. You got to understand that. But even if it's 1,000 people, even if let's say one of my videos on there is getting 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 true views, I call it, like real people actually watching the video, right? That's eating up into YouTube's market share. And so YouTube, as strong as it is, I think it's slowly, very slowly being eaten away at. And that's a little scary, right? Because YouTube's really the business people look at as a second big dog. But what about the biggest of the big dogs? Well, that's Google McDougal, right? The real deal Holyfield, the Google search, okay? This is a big dog. Now, Google search has had massive market share for 15 plus years now. It's been, ever since I was in college back in 08, 09, it was always the search platform I always used and everybody always used. It was the best, right? And still this day, it is the best. But the problem is the way people are viewing search in the future is differently than we view it today. And so there's a belief that for the next 10 years, right? 10 years from now, the Google search, the way traditional search has been done, is not going to be the same way it's done in the future. Now, I cannot foresee exactly where things are going to be at in relation to that 10 years from now, but there is at least a potential that Google search could be disrupted over this next decade, right? And there's a belief that Google is behind on AI. Now, you might think this is crazy because Google's known to be an AI company. They've been working on this stuff forever. But there's certain things that are coming out now that are making Google look more and more like maybe they are behind in AI. Have you seen the big controversy that took off over this weekend? Let me show you this. Shocking, okay? Google down as it pulled its AI face generator, stays offline. So basically, Google had this AI face generator, okay? You could like search certain terms and it was supposed to generate you, a face in relation to that, right? But the problem was they created this face generator, but it wasn't like making any white people. It was basically just making everybody but white people, okay? Now, at first, this was only picking up, like I first found out about this last week and I found out about it on X. So it was kind of more on like the fringes of certain groups, let's just call it that. We're talking about like Google's got this product and, they never show white people. Are they trying to erase white people from existence or what's going on here? Okay. And so it was stirring kind of in some certain groups out there. I'll just put it like that. Okay. But then what happened over this weekend, it blew up mainstream. And the reason being is it showed people of color in, I don't even want to say that word right there. You can read that word if you want to read it there because I don't want to say it out loud. I might get demonetized from the good old Google McDougal we're watching this on right now, right? But it showed people of color in those specific uniforms. And that's where the line was drawn. They were like, okay, Google AI, if you eliminate all white people, that's okay. But if you put people in color in those uniforms, that's not okay. And then mainstream media picked up on it and it became this huge thing. And now Google's had to completely take it down. And it is such a bad look. It's even worse than like maybe they say the go woke, go broke thing, right? A lot of people say that. Well, this in regards to Google, this is like past that, in my opinion. Like this is way past that. This is like, whoa, what is going on here? It makes Google look bad from like a moral ethics standpoint. On top of that, it makes Google look really bad from a standpoint of how are you supposed to be a leader in AI and like you're doing stuff like this? Like that's just ridiculous. Like that's insane, right? And you're supposed to be the leader of AI or one of the leaders. And so this has created a whole big problem for Google where now Wall Street's looking at this and like, oh my gosh, like Google's in freaking trouble when it comes to AI. Like they're way behind Microsoft and these other companies are competing with. That's a problem, folks, okay? Now on top of that, they've got a mess on the government side they're dealing with. The Justice Department's suing Google right now for supposedly monopolizing digital advertising technologies. They got several problems with other governments around the world right now. they're going through a moment like Meta went through 5 years ago when the government was after Meta in a massive, massive way. Meta finally got through all that over the past few years, but now it looks like the government's really coming down on Google McDougal big time. They're also looking into, basically, Google pays, I believe it's tens of billions of dollars to Apple to essentially be kind of the default search on Apple products, and that could be potentially disrupted here. The government gets involved between that. But the thing is, that's going to hurt. I mean, I don't know if that's going to hurt that Google that much, but let's say it does. Okay, so that's another messy situation for Google, but I also think that could hurt Apple a lot worse because Apple's making bank off that. That's all straight profit for Apple, right? And if so, I don't know if government's going to push that because government, you got to understand, like usually the stock they're the most invested in is Apple. So I don't know what's going to happen there, but in terms of the politicians, at least, usually Apple's their number one position. So we'll see. But all I know is it's a mess on several different fronts. It's going to cost Google fortunes in terms of legal fees, but not just that. It's bad for branding. It's also potentially huge fines here. It's also potential disruptions of business model. None of it's necessarily good for Google. So they're in a mess on several different fronts there, okay? Now, in relation to the company, they're expected to have 16% growth in EPS, a little over 16% growth in EPS this year we're in, right? 48.9 analysts have numbers on this. 21 forward P. That's fair. It's very fair. I mean, if you're looking at a stock and you can say, double-digit EPS growth, trading at a 21 forward P, and it's been a very consistent business model over the years, that's fair. That's attractive pricing you're getting on Google stock, right? But, here's the problem. Big problem. Meta right now, remember, everybody's competing for your money, including stocks, right? Meta is trading at a 24 forward P with 34% EPS growth expected this year. So we're talking about a double up of EPS growth expected for 2024, right? But trading only slightly above on a forward P basis. So once again, this gets into the competition of like, is money really better over here in Google or better in Meta, right? This is a problem, a big problem. So I would say the moral of the story is Google is a buy, but I would say Google's not nearly as safe of a stock as it was 5 or 10 years ago. Because if we go back 5 or especially 10 years ago, Google was a disruptor. Now they're the ones being disrupted. As I put right here, they went from being the hunter to now they're the ones being the hunted, right? And also, 5 to 10 years ago, it wasn't thought they would have all these sorts of problems with the Department of Justice and the government potentially cracking down on them and coming down on them in a huge way. And now you got to deal with all that. You got the AI stuff going on. It's looking more and more like Google's actually legitimately way behind in relation to several fronts of AI, which is embarrassing because there's no reason Google should be behind. With how much money they've spent on tech and engineers over the last 10 years, look at the numbers. They're startling. They've spent just about as much, if not more than just about any company on the planet in regards to tech. And the fact that this company would be potentially behind on AI is shocking. I mean, it's like you can't even fathom that. Like how could this happen? And so it's a buy, but it's not nearly as safe as it was in the past, right? The other thing I'll say is Meta's a way better risk-reward buy at this point in time. Somebody like myself, I'm so heavily invested into Meta that, I can't really consider buying any more Meta shares. For me, it's just kind of like, if I was to buy anything, it would be Google just because I have so much invested in Meta. But if I had no money in Meta or Google and you told me buy one of these two stocks, dude, without question, I'm buying Meta. I don't have to deal with all the government crap. I don't have to deal with a company that's behind on technology. If anything, Meta's a leader, right? When you look at what they're doing with the Llama program, oh my gosh. I'm getting a forward P, slightly above Google, but I mean, for way better growth. And then the last component we got to speak about here, and it's something you got to talk about, is leadership, right? I think Sundar Pichai is a fine CEO. I think he's a fine CEO. I don't think there's anything wrong with him. But you're competing against somebody like a Zuckerberg that's a founder and has led this company from his dorm room to be one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful company in the world, right? You're dealing with a different talent level there. With a Zuckerberg, he can do whatever he wants. If he says, we're cutting 20% of the staff and we're going in this direction, it's done like that. And it's going to end up being the best decision because he's one of the best businessmen in the world. I know people don't look at him that way, but you don't build a company that's $2 trillion market cap without being one of the best businessmen in the world, right? Sergey Brin and the other gentleman, those guys built Google into what it was, right? They took this company and they created the whole thing you see today was created by those two gentlemen, right? Sergey Brin and Larry Page, right? They created Google to what it is. They're the ones that made the acquisition of YouTube. They're the ones that built Google search into what it was, right? They put the company in its great position it's in here today. They made the acquisition of Android. And Sundar Pichai, like I said, good CEO, but he's not the one that built this company. He's just kind of the one running it. It's kind of like a Tim Cook situation, right? Where it's like, Steve Jobs and Johnny Ive are the one that architected the whole thing that's going on here today. And it's just like, it's vicious when you got to compete against somebody like a Zuckerberg. Like, I think Timmy Cook over there is going to get cooked by Zuckerberg on VR. And I think Sundar Pichai is clearly getting cooked by Zuckerberg right now on, any business front there. And so that's kind of what's going on. I think it's a buy, but it's not the buy that it was 5 or 10 years ago. And there's a reason Wall Street's kind of looking the other way in regards to this one and why they're kind of selling out. So that's a tough situation in regards to Google McDougal. Now, I've produced a few videos on the channel recently talking about a lot of other stocks that are opportunities because Google's not the only opportunity in this market. I can tell you there's a lot of stocks that are opportunities in this market. I produced this video last night. Not sure how many of you guys got to see this one. Looks like about 39,000 of you got to see it so far, 23 hours ago. This one talks about several different stocks I'm looking to potentially buy here. And then I also created this video 3 weeks ago. 51,000 people have gotten to see this one about stocks I'm buying. And then this one, 12 days ago, 53,000 people got to see this one so far. 9 stocks to buy now equal to stealing money. So those videos can give you some other ideas outside of just Google. So that's the moral of the story in regards to Google McDougal, okay? Enjoy my free workshop that's down there. That's going to be pinned comment. I think you get a lot of value out of that one here today, folks. Enjoy that. Appreciate you joining me. Much love. Thanks for being subscribed. And have a great day.